on the other side not working, or did they just not want us to sit over there? Cause I know.
No, I think it works.
Oh, okay. Cause I know before it worked, and then they put tape over it, so I thought maybe it didn't work anymore.
No, I better check it.
Cause that one, and that one doesn't fall out like this one does. So.
Let's plug it in right here. It's actually upside down.
Yeah, we'll try this one. Okay. I'll let you. How are you guys?
Okay, there they are, I think.
Okay, so jail concept and transit preliminary proposal are the two we'll use tonight.
Copy those out here.
That'd be great.
And then, I can either load them now, and you can, if I double click here, and I think there's something before you
Okay.
and the next, but it'll
Right.
just be, on the bottom.
Yeah, so that's fine. Just have them up there
Great.
so that we can do that.
Good deal.
All right.
And here, I'll get that out of there.
Okay. I don't want to pull it out. I'm the guy who disconnects them all the time.
You know what, and I do too. I just wanted to make it
I
look
know.
good, right?
Thank you, sir.
Transportation network providers, all this new terminology is legal, right?
Okay. Then
We had a budget workshop, so we're going to start in about, as soon as we get everybody here, I think 2 to 3 minutes. Well, maybe the cavalry's coming, so maybe 2 minutes. Really?
Right, you rock. Hey.
That's awesome. Well, you got a great group of people.
I have decided nor to take training to people who advertise, and I need to find great reaction.
Oh, good.
OSF, Home Sweet Home, they're all like, we're talking to
That's what Chris Koo suggested to me, and so I reached out to Julie Dobson to send an email.
Vicki Tilton. I talked to Vicki.
Oh, they have answered too?
Oh, they keep them. And she's pissed at them already because Green Beans and the snotty things about downtown redevelopment.
Oh my gosh, at least snotty.
Suggested throwing trash at transgender people. And, I mean, Vicki is very, very supportive of, lesbians, transgender.
Right, I mean, they've gone beyond any kind of human decency.
Just backfire, and it'll be fun to watch.
I'm glad she is. Well, I don't know if you saw, I had to give my tickets to Michael.
He called everybody out.
Man, I tried so, Tina said, I would if I could.
Yeah.
to get Weird Al to come to our public comment. But Tina said she didn't think she could organize that.
She's in Italy.
Well, we'll have to give her a special shout out, won't we?
I offered to hang out in her luggage, but nah.
She's gonna need a big bag.
Thanks.
Normal size adult.
Hey, George, I caught that. We're going to go ahead and start once Alderwoman Howland gets her food. Oh.
Oh, gee. You're going for public shaming now.
I thought you were getting food. I don't know. Okay, thank you everyone for your indulgence. We actually have 5 meetings this evening of varying forms, one which has begun at 4:30, and that was a budget task force. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council work session to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Lauer.
Here.
Alderman Sage.
Here.
Alderman Mwalalambe. Alderman Burgess. Here. Alderman Painter. Alderman Schmidt. Here. Schmidt, excuse me. Alderman Black.
Here.
Alderman Hallman. Here. And Alderman Fruin.
Actually, I was
Mayor
here the
Renner.
I'm here, but the other night we had the mock city council, and everybody's name was different, so I feel your pain. Anyway, welcome. Thank you, Sherry. Oh, you're not. That was the, those were the ones from the other night. They had special ones printed for them. Oh, you're underneath there. There you go. Okay. Yeah, we just want to make sure that you're not mistaken for somebody. Okay, fantastic. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and begin with public comment, and we have one person who has asked to speak to us with public comment, and so you have up to 3 minutes. Mr. Lee Utsi, would you please come forward, sir? Thank you. Good evening. Thanks.
My name is Lee Utsi, and I'm owner of Magic Bus Shuttles. I'm speaking about Uber. I realize I have to make this quick. I've read the proposal for Uber, and although I don't understand a lot of the language, I understand a bit of it. And we once had a downtown entertainment task force that was big. It was important. It provided for safety downtown and parking and things of this nature. And a lot of what's going on here is going to undermine that. We're going to have a lot of traffic downtown that we would have normally. We don't have parking for ourselves right now, and I can't get anything through for that. I try to solicit the ears of people in high places, and I don't hear anything really. But Uber is moving forward, and one of the biggest concerns I have about it is there's really no public there's no public hearing. There's no place we can go to dispute Uber or not. Pull up your Uber on your phone right now. There's an Uber available 3 minutes away from here. They're not even legal yet. This is how they feel about following the rules before you vote them in. I don't know what they're going to do after you vote them in. But I would like to see a public hearing at least added to them becoming, this entity in our city, and make them accountable. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, we don't directly, go back and forth with public comment, but hopefully many of your questions will begin to be answered in this forum, and then obviously there's an action item that will be debated by the council at 7 o'clock. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. And just FYI, this also has been about a 4-month controversy that we've talked about almost at every mayoral open house, and just to put in a plug for the mayoral open houses. They are Friday from 4:30 to 5:30, right over there. You don't have to make an appointment. It doesn't even have to be on the agenda, right? I mean, as I say, I think it was about 4 months ago, maybe it was 5 months ago when we started talking about Uber. But as we move forward, though, speaking of Uber and transportation network providers, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over. I think Angela, or are you going to begin and then introduce George? Is that right? Or Mr. Hales, are you going to start? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, this is Angela Fiennes Jimenez from Sterling Northrop, representing the city of Bloomington. I am just going to give you, the mayor's correct, we've had about 4 months of discussions on Uber, probably about 5 different official meetings. It's a joint effort with the city, town of Normal, and the main person that has been representing the city of Bloomington at these meetings is Assistant Corporation Counsel George Boyle. And he'll talk about how the Transportation Network Provider Ordinance provides similar regulations along with the taxi cab ordinance that's up. George, do you want to?
If I could just make one point of clarification, just so that everybody understands. The city of Bloomington, under an intergovernmental agreement, regulates for both Bloomington and Normal. And we have been in contact with people from the town of Normal at every phase of this. But just to clarify that we're the ones who would regulate or deregulate any for-hire vehicles. Mr. Boyle, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. There's 2 ordinances that are before the council tonight that we'll address in the work session. And I'll do my best to keep my remarks brief so that there'll be times for questions. And hopefully also we'll be able to address some of Mr. Yusi's concerns as well as the council's. The first ordinance relates to transportation network companies, and these are companies that link passengers and drivers through use of a digital application. The second ordinance allows taxi cab companies the option of being regulated under the same licensing and insurance requirements that the first ordinance would make applicable to transportation network companies. And this is an attempt to provide a bit of a level playing field. It says to the taxi cab companies, you have the option of either proceeding under the regulations that currently apply to you, or to the same ones that the transportation network companies would be operating under. Now, with regard to the first ordinance, the Transportation Network Providers Act is a state statute that provides a framework for operation of transportation network companies, which are called TNCs. The act takes effect June 1st, and it provides for a good deal of self-regulation by the TNCs. So the companies are required to conduct background checks of drivers both for criminal history and for driving history. They're required to have insurance and to have their drivers insured, and also to fill gaps if the drivers don't have insurance of the amounts required under the statute. Good sounding things, but what it doesn't have are ways of assuring that the companies are doing these self-regulatory kinds of things. And the state statute also doesn't have consequences if the companies are not doing those things, or if the drivers are not abiding by the requisites of the act. So fortunately, the act allows us as a home rule unit the authority to plug up some of these gaps. And that's what we've attempted to do with the 2 ordinances that are before you this evening. We are trying here to strike a balance between accepting this new technology and this new business model and the traditional regulatory role performed by the city in assuring public safety by direct regulation of taxi cabs. And in trying to strike that balance, we're looking at a network that's safe, reliable, affordable, and accessible. And we're recognizing that really in the setting in Bloomington Normal, it's possible for transportation network companies to play a vital role in that transportation system. I'll give you an example. One time that we often hear that on Saturday nights or after big events, it's very difficult to get a taxi cab from the traditional taxi cab companies. Our hope is, and the claim by transportation network providers has been that they can be available to fill these peak demand, to fill in transportation needs during these peak demand periods. They also can be an important source of income for people who are either driving part-time or otherwise using, taking advantage of the ability to transport people pursuant to this model. So to that end, the proposed ordinance incorporates the standards of the Transportation Network Providers Act, and actually has some higher standards in some instances. It incorporates those standards, but it still has some mechanisms whereby the city can monitor that the standards are being met, and it also has some consequences if they are not. So this ordinance really tries to focus on verification, accountability, and consequences. So some provisions of the proposed ordinance intended to secure these objectives are the licensing of transportation network companies. This means that the companies have to qualify under specifics described in the Act and in the ordinance, and that if they don't qualify or don't perform as required under either the state law or the ordinance, their license can be suspended or revoked. Companies also have to name a designated agent who's available to accept service and available in case of emergencies. There's a requirement that not only that background checks be conducted, but that a plan to submit them be provided by the companies, and that there be a mechanism for the city to audit at least twice a year that those checks are being done. The companies are required to maintain records with regard to driver records, investigations, and their own procedures with respect to background checks. And these are available, as I said, twice a year, made available, but they also can be provided upon specific request by the city. So that's just some general remarks with regard to them. And I will say that the same sanctions apply to both transportation network companies and their drivers as would apply to taxi cab companies and their drivers. Those sanctions are fines of from $250 to $3,000, and also can include suspension or revocation of the license. Now, with regard to taxi cab companies, just very simply, as I said before, we're interested in providing a level playing field. And so the second ordinance allows taxi cabs to taxi cab companies to operate under the same licensing and insurance and background requirements under the same self-regulatory scheme that the transportation network companies operate under. I should emphasize two very important things here. One is that this is a pilot project, so it sunsets after 1 year by the terms of the two ordinances before you. This will allow us to judge whether the regulations are operating in a way that benefits the community. And then the second thing is that, very often people say, well, what about the Uber ordinance? Or what's going on with Uber? We're not trying to write an ordinance for Uber. We're trying to write an ordinance for the public that takes into account not only Uber as a transportation network provider, but also other companies that may choose to operate on that model. So with that, I'd open up for any questions that you have.
And just again to clarify, if the current taxi cab companies want to operate under the current rules, we're not forcing them to change.
That's right.
Okay. And then just in terms of a broader picture of things, some places, some cities in Illinois have decided to not regulate at all. Okay. Some have decided, Chicago on the other extreme, to be extensively involved in regulation. And this, I think, is on the continuum closer to the low regulation end as opposed to the high regulation end. But at that questions of Mr. Boyle or comments by council members? Alderwoman Schmidt.
I think I was beaten by
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Sage.
Oh, Alderman Sage and Schmidt. Right.
Yeah, I'm quick on the draw over here. I appreciate that, Karen. George, it's mentioned in here that there was a meeting on April 8, 2015 with taxi cab and vehicle for hire company owners. Can you just kind of summarize that meeting? I'm sure there were specific issues that some of our current operators had questions or concerns about, and was there some consensus reached that as we move to these revised ordinances, was there some consensus with current business owners and operators?
Well, first of all, there were 3 company owners that attended. And a bit of it was somewhat speculatory in that, this is a new model. They were interested in a level playing field. They were interested in being kept abreast of what was going to happen. They were interested in providing email input. And there really, I don't know that I'd say there was a consensus in terms of where it should go. I mean, obviously, I think it'd be fair to say the consensus was concern about there being a level playing field, about their model being able to survive, or in some cases, there was some interest expressed in perhaps adopting this model. I will say that some other issues were raised, and there may be other changes to the taxi cab ordinance, partly in response to communications we've had with owners of taxi cab and vehicle for hire companies. I can't really specify the date when that would be made, partly because of, there's a lot of input we'd be looking at. But some of our ordinances need to be updated with respect to taxi cabs. And
so with respect to these proposed ordinances, George, and so it will take some tweaking, right, to actually ensure that we have a level playing field. Is there a perception by the current business owners and operators that there is some relative parity between them and these other new transport companies like Uber when it comes to doing business now in Bloomington, if these proposed ordinances are adopted?
I don't know that I can speak to that because there's a number of companies, and I've noticed when I've gone to the meetings and that there's a broad spectrum of opinion on a lot of things. So I hesitate to say what the consensus of people's opinions are that aren't here or that.
Okay. And in the other, just one more question.
I will tell you this, though, just in terms of getting that. We were open, we had this discussion on April 8th, which was 2 days after we had met initially with the folks from Uber. There was several emails from both Uber and from taxi cab company owners and vehicle for hire owners. So we've been open to it, and it hasn't been really a process that people are ignorant of its occurring.
So then a second question, George, then from a self-regulation viewpoint where we put the burden onto the owner-operator to be in compliance and meet the certain aspects of the ordinances. Do we have a process? Do we have a kind of an identified process for how we will audit that? I know we're going to go in, 2 times a year, you said. I mean, are those unannounced? Do we have a criteria for what we will expect these TNC operators to be able to produce during those audits? I mean, just give me some sense of some of the specifics around those semi-annual audits.
Okay, well, first of all, it's fair to say that the audits are capped at twice a year. Okay, so there's not really a requirement that they be twice a year. Having said that, they're capped unless there are unless there's specific complaints about a driver or allegations by the city of illegal activity, in which case the audit must occur. The types of records that need to be kept are records pertaining to the driver and to the driver's history, to investigations of complaints that the company is to be conducting, to specific trip information if there's been a crime or something along that line. So those are generally speaking, the kinds of
And that was a
requirements.
sticking point, just to clarify, at first, from the standpoint of Uber, they did not want to release their drivers' names. And I could understand proprietary why they wanted, but we have a public policy interest in ensuring that people's background checks are appropriate. I actually had some interns go through and try to become Uber drivers, and they go through the background check process, and there's vehicle, stuff that's required. It can't be more than 10 years old, and it can't be something that had been 4 doors and all kinds of things that happen. But they also have, as they point out, and actually Mark Peterson noted that when we were in the One Voice trip, he was on a few cabs. Now, of course, this is in Washington, D.C., that had not been very well maintained. But all the Uber vehicles were, before you can get a second Uber app, or excuse me, you go back and get a second Uber ride, you have to fill out 4 or 5 questions about the driver and the cleanliness of the vehicle and the appropriateness of it before you can go on the next one. So there's some of that self-regulatory stuff seemed pretty clear. And so that doesn't mean that it assuaged all of our concerns. It just means they had had a lot of stuff kind of built in. And in talking to other mayors and other communities, that's one of the reasons why many of them didn't bother to regulate. I mean, in other words, the places that haven't even entered this, right? Because as of June 1st, they can operate. And as Mr. Yutzi had said, they have been operating, and we've not been terribly happy about that because they're not operating legally before June 1st.
Well, and my concern, and I'll just wrap up, is that, so this is one of those, this is almost like kind of a no-win for the city council, in my opinion, because it'll be, well, we're trying to overregulate, we're trying to stifle competition and whatever on one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end, if there ever is an issue, an incident with a rider, or a passenger of some kind, and it'll be, well, the city should have done a better job of regulating that. They should have had a better understanding of who these service providers were and that type of thing.
Just on the background checks, though, we've got what we thought was a very good compromise. The police were fine with it. Normal, everybody was fine with it. You're not going to be able to FOIA and find out who their drivers are, so other network companies can't come in and poach off your employees. But we've got, what is it, Mr. Boyd? It's
The initials for the driver and the last 4 digits of their driver's license.
the driver's
number.
license to ensure that certain background checks have happened. And they have, $1 million in insurance, and there are other things that are, that other communities have found to be okay. We don't know. As we say, this is, I think this is a deal, if you will, compromise between Normal, the police, and others. Try it for a year and see.
Okay.
And then make sure that the cab companies can operate under their old rules if they want. And I'm sorry.
Thank you, George.
Alderwoman.
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderwoman Schmidt.
I think I probably just had my questions answered. I'm concerned about what seems to be difficulties in kind of regulating the consistency between existing taxi cab companies who have, for want of a better phrase, sort of bricks and mortar invested in their companies, and how do we know about these drivers? It sounds like Uber has a fairly sophisticated...
They use 2 different companies, and I asked my intern to be here this evening because he did all the work on it. But he's not. But there are two companies they use for background checks. And anyway, Mr. Boyle, do you remember any more of the details on their or the names of the 2 companies?
You mean that are doing the background checks?
Yeah, for Uber.
Oh, they have one called Higher Ease, and then there's another one. Both of them are approved by the National Association of Professional Background Checkers.
So there's
Screeners, excuse me.
So there's not a lot of opportunity for sort of rogue drivers, so to speak, to come and
We hope, and that hasn't been
that's
the
not been their
experience
model.
that in other communities. It doesn't mean that some don't. I think as one person had said to me, kind of as an anecdote, there was an Uber driver who attacked somebody in Texas. But we don't know whether that is a statistically significant difference in the number of people who maybe were cab drivers throughout the entire country who may have had a similar complaint. So we don't know that. There's not enough evidence.
Yeah,
right now.
it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence that they have been out there operating without a license
That
already.
doesn't inspire a lot of
So,
confidence at all. And I can assure you, when we first met with them, we've had the Powell over here, I think even Mr. Peterson and I both had attitudes. And most of those were put to rest as we heard some of what they did. Not totally, not 100%.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Alderman Lauer and
Yeah,
Howman.
I just wanted to express a couple of concerns here. George, help me understand the differential between the commercial insurance required by the current cab companies and what would be required of these new services.
Well, first of all, the insurance that's required of the cab companies is generally a bit less than the ones that are required of the newer services. The difference, but the whole issue of insurance is a bit complicated, so I don't know exactly how much you want me to go into it. So for transportation network companies, the state statute, which is quoted essentially word for word in section 1210 of our ordinance, looks at three different levels of insurance. The first is when the driver is driving privately. The second would be when the driver is on the network and but hasn't accepted a ride. And the third is during the ride portion, when there's a passenger in the vehicle. So in that respect, it's different than the cab situation, where in the cab situation, the companies insure the vehicles just as they operate as commercial vehicles. So that's different. The levels of insurance on each stage, the private, what you might call network, and the actual traveling or passenger carrying aspect, are different under the state statute depending on each of those stages. But maybe the best thing about the statute is that if there's a gap in the driver's insurance at level B or C, the network or the traveling component parts, the transportation network company is required to fill that gap. So that's a bit comforting. Now, whether there's going to be an issue on the first level with sometimes on private drivers, there are exemptions in their insurance provided by commercial insurers, or that where an insurer will say to a driver, well, you're using your vehicle for commercial purposes. We're not going to cover you. But the idea is to make drivers are, to be made aware of this possibility and to cover themselves accordingly. And the companies are to fill in the gaps on B and C. So that's a summation, and probably not the best summation you could.
I think that helps us, though, and it starts a bit more intrinsic understanding on our part.
And the other thing is so the one thing that we put in that the Act doesn't have is that before a TNC gets the license, they have to show us they've got the insurance.
Appreciate that. My concern, and I don't think that we probably have an answer to this, but is from an economic standpoint. I'm sure Alderman Fruin and a few of us, Alderman Sage, were here in the community when we didn't have any major cab companies, and what we did have was very, very sparse and probably not very well maintained. And I'm concerned that economically we might be a bit at a loss if we would lose one or two of these companies and be dependent upon the other type of service alone. Two different types of business models, and primarily you've got a fixed asset in a cab and fixed costs in terms of that insurance being on it wouldn't be privately insured or be insured part of the time as a private driver, so it'd be a different rate. And I understand the differential there, but from a break-even load factor standpoint, we have to understand that our market, 80% of that is probably happening between Thursday evening and Sunday evening, and so some of the larger companies have idle time, and Uber does not have that, and so from a cost standpoint, they're at an advantage. And so I worry about that, and I worry about whether it's really proper at this point to continue to set rates on our cab companies or what those rates might be. And again, I don't think that we have an answer here. I just would hate to lose the competitive nature of the market that we have right now. Thanks.
Okay. Alderwoman Howman and then Milawamboy, we're really going to have to move because we have another really important subject and we have township. So, and we're going to be talking about this again this evening. So, Alderwoman Helm?
So is 1 year, if somewhere between now and 365 days after we would pass this, if we're not happy with what's happening, can we pull this?
I think we can do whatever we want, right?
Okay.
I mean, obviously, we got 5 votes
I
on
mean,
the
they-
council.
No,
It's
but
a legislative act, so you could
Yeah,
rescind
okay.
it or, you know,
And then
We
if
could
there were,
rescind or- yeah,
if-
so we're-
You could
yeah,
change
it's-
it.
But we have to come back
if I
before
could,
365 days.
and just to briefly address what Alderman Lauer said, just about rate changes and things like that. That was one of the things that was discussed at the vehicle for hire and cab meeting. That was a concern. And it's something that we can revisit during the period of this. You know, like I said, there may be some changes to the taxi ordinance that will be in the offing. And
Okay, yeah,
we're
George,
not going to wait
I'm
a
sorry.
year for that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to move.
I'm sorry.
Anything
and
follow up there?
this doesn't preclude another Uber-type company from coming in? and
No,
doing
absolutely
the same
not.
thing?
And there are several others. Uber is just the main one. I mean, at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, there are multiple panels on Uber. I mean,
Yeah.
some version of what Uber does is what everybody expects the entire transportation system to look like in the next 2 to 5 years. So cab companies will merge with the kind of model that we currently see. That's what the expectation is.
Yeah, and just, Mr. Lauer, I've been stranded too many times when a cab does not come that I've called for, so I'm willing to try something.
Okay. Alderman Miller-Wambwe.
Just a quick question. Can you address the parking issue in the downtown that was referenced earlier?
You know, that's the first one I've heard. I guess I was trying to guess where that came from because it was not expressed by any of the owners that were at the meeting. First of all, I guess it would mean that there'd be more cars if there were Uber cars added to the cars on the road. So maybe that's what that would mean. I guess another way, that would be the downside. The upside might be it'd be easier for people to get out of downtown. In terms of the problem about Mr. Utsi, who runs a vehicle for hire service, saying there was nowhere to park, there are designated hubs, so I'm not clear as to what that means. I'd certainly be interested in hearing from anybody who has those concerns.
As someone who's been down there at like 2 in the morning, it can be a little bit of a madhouse at times, and I definitely am sympathetic with being able to move cars in and out safely, considering that some of the folks that are patrons down there may not be in the best state of mind, so it's definitely a concern.
I bet you've got more experience than anybody else up here at 2 in the morning.
No comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We are going to have, this is just a work session. I do need to move to the next item, and we're going to be debating and discussing this at our regular scheduled meeting. We're going to move next, and just want to make clear, Mr. Wasson, you have a presentation, and also if I could recognize our distinguished sheriff who's in the audience, and Jim Solder from the county board, and I did see our state's attorney, Jason Chambers, who was here. Anyway, if you'll pass along my thanks. We're glad to have the county cavalry here this evening.
Mayor Renner, honorable members of the City Council, thank you for inviting us to come and visit with you today. I'm going to also recognize Kyle Bohm with Connect Transit staff. Unfortunately,
I'm sorry, Kyle.
Unfortunately, the Connect Transit Board is meeting at this time as well, and so I may be joined by Ryan Whitehouse, one of the Connect Transit board members, if he is able to finish his duties there and return quickly here. We'll see. But we wanted to thank you for the invitation to come and talk briefly about the projects that we are working on, and those are the possible expansion and renovations to our facilities in the Adult Corrections Jail, at the Law and Justice Center, and that facility is, I think all of you know, is located between Front and Olive and East Street, as the diagram above you shows. What you see is a conceptual drawing. It really is at this point just a concept that we're working with the county board on, and we received the needs assessment and pre-architectural report about 30 days ago. we have engaged a separate firm to do a peer review of that report to evaluate the cost projections on that report. And then the county board will determine what direction we move forward with this project on. I can tell you that you see a couple of different colors that are represented there in the drawing, actually 3 of them. You see a floor level that is in white, and then a green level, which is the second floor, and a mezzanine floor, which is what we have in the 1990s pod, which is just to the west of the rendition. So that brown brick structure that you see was a 1990s addition to the jail facility. It includes 2 direct supervision pods, and both of those pods have both a ground level and a mezzanine level that run around the facility. So as you look at the green or the yellow floors, that is a floor plus a mezzanine level, and so that describes why the first floor level appears to be much smaller than the second and third levels that are shown in the rendition. One of the things that we found as we worked with the consultants on the needs assessment and pre-architectural is that in urban areas, it is not recommended that any corrections facilities be located on the ground floor of an urban jail. And that is true of both our 1976 first original Law and Justice construction, as well as the 1990s edition. There are no jail holding facilities located on the first floor. So part of the process of evaluating how we would possibly move forward with an expansion of the jail was to evaluate construction possibilities for the first floor of any expansion process. And we worked through a large number of scenarios, and what we ended up with was a section of the north part of the expansion process, so the end towards Front Street, that was left in a shell in most of our designs so that it could provide for a couple of different alternatives that we were looking at. At the time, the community had no crisis intervention center. We had no facility where individuals could be stabilized in a crisis mental health situation and be treated for a period of time before being released back to the community. And so as we began this process several years ago now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, one of the things that we included for in the preliminary designs was a space for that type of facility. We spent a lot of time, our consultants spent a lot of time working with the agencies that provide those types of services, as well as county staff, to determine if it made sense to have a co-location for a crisis stabilization center. And although there are some economies of scale that we recognized, we found that there were many other things that created a situation where we didn't think it was probably, at least at this time and with this facility, the most advisable path for the county to take. So that part of the recommendation of the needs assessment to the county board was that a co-located crisis stabilization facility was not recommended. And as I believe all the councilmen know, we were lucky enough to work through the state of Illinois and with one of our community partners, Chestnut Health Systems, to be able to bring a crisis stabilization center to Bloomington Normal over the last 12 months. So again, there exists an area that we didn't have a specific use for. Simultaneous with that project, we have been discussing for about a year with Connect Transit options for improving the transfer station locations that currently exist on Front Street. And trying to identify opportunities where we could look to provide improved facilities that would make it more attractive for those to use mass transit to access downtown, and more attractive for the users of downtown as well. And I'm going to check to see if Ryan's here, but he's not, so I'll go on a little bit. And I will say that probably a big snowstorm in Washington, D.C. did more for this conversation than anything else.
Tell me about it.
A lot of us were stranded in Washington, D.C. for several days during the One Voice trip. And the One Voice trip took three projects, but two of those projects were the provision for mental health services and expansion of necessary justice facilities for mental health services for the community, and the jail expansion is part of that project, and also a request for a Tiger grant from the Department of Transportation for improved transit transfer with a specific vision towards downtown. So we had an opportunity sitting in hotels watching the snowfall outside to talk about what we learned, and what we learned in one day was that what especially the Department of Transportation was looking for were opportunities where we would bring a integrated approach that would bring community services together with transit in any type of application that was put forward for a Tiger grant. They really wanted us to look for opportunities to bring social services, community services to citizens as part of what they call ladders of opportunity. And so when we looked at our site, we recognized that we have PATH, our crisis service, located across the street from this location. We have United Way across the street from this location. We have a large number of county agencies, including the health department, servicing individuals within the county complex on this campus, and the city hall right across the street as well. And we thought, doesn't this go a long ways towards meeting what we're looking for? And then we took a look at transportation and actual transportation routes. And we were lucky enough to find that not only are we on the major bus routes, and this is one of the busiest transit locations for Connect Transit, and they've increased, since 2014, they've increased their ridership by 40%. But we have a large parking facility that would allow individuals to park and ride. We are located not far from the Constitution Trail. I'd say less than a block away from Constitution Trail to the south, and that trail that goes east and west. There is also a rail line contiguous with that was included in Tri-County Regional Planning's planning process that identified both a need for transportation connections between Bloomington and Normal and Peoria, and an opportunity in the future for possibility of light trail connections between those communities. So we really did see that there were a lot of synergies with this location. So we spent a little time, and again, these are touchscreen. Maybe not. No. We spent some time, and I will say this is preliminary, a little jagged, but these are conceptual drawings of what has been discussed so far. There's nothing in stone, from the perspective of the actual county facility nor this transit location now, but this is a concept of what possibly could work for the site. As I mentioned, there's area in this portion of the Law and Justice Center expansion on the first floor that could be available for a lobby area that would be similar to what we currently see at Uptown Station in Normal. And then in addition to that, we have a large area noted here designated for bus parking and transfer. It significantly improves safety for users. Obviously, we believe that it's going to improve comfort. These areas would be covered likely, so there would be covered areas with heaters in the exterior areas as well as that inside lobby area. We envision that there would be kiosks that would assist and connect people with social service agencies, with the health department and services that are provided there. So we believe that those are all concepts that come together. I probably talked a lot, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Kyle's here.
Okay. Questions, just to clarify, this was obviously part of our one voice trip and one voice ask, and now you're putting a little bit more details on the particular proposal. Any questions, comments? Alderman Sage.
Just, so, first of all, thanks for your presentation, and would we anticipate that, would there be other other county operations that may be housed elsewhere, like in the government center right now, that would move to the new facility, or will this be strictly, I mean, almost wholly dedicated to the mental health stabilization effort?
The upper floors, and as I didn't go back and talk very specifically about. There are different build-out scenarios, and that's why you see a green level, a yellow level. And so there are different build-out scenarios that the county board may be considering as we move forward, and those are available. But predominantly, those are about providing for individuals that need to have different types of housing due to their medical conditions, and also ensuring that we have the right capacity mix so that we can deal with those individuals appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Black.
Thank you, Bill. Good to see you again. So I guess I have a couple things here. I like the concept. It's a provocative idea. I guess I'm going to have a hard time of reconciling. We're putting a bus station, a transfer station inside a mental health facility. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's an expansion of the Law and Justice Center.
Sure.
Yes, there are going to be components now that are a part of our corrections facility that'll be part of this building. But it really is. It's an expansion of our facility that's going to provide us access to those available those available and necessary services. But I don't think I would call this an expansion any more than when we added 3 floors to the current Law and Justice Center structure, and we moved capacity around. We wouldn't have said that was just an expansion just for the courts, for instance. It was about a lot of things, and a lot of offices moved, and as you know, we moved offices to the Law and Justice Center and remodeled the Law and Justice Center to provide better housing again. I think this is just another concept of we're going to, again, look at our Law and Justice Center. We're going to redesign the facility and expand it as necessary to meet our community needs today, and we think that that a transfer facility within this type of a structure fits within the public service kind of direction that we want to go.
Certainly, yeah, and I agree. I think conceptually it's a great idea. I'm just curious. I would want to see at some point like how would the security work. It just seems to me to have a bus transfer station right outside of a jail, even very close to there. I mean, what's to stop someone from getting out and getting on a bus?
Well, they're not all Matt Damon.
Well, I know.
Interestingly enough,
that's kind of my hang up at this point.
yeah. Interestingly enough, one of the large positives of our evaluation of this process is we've been working with Connect on their grant application has been the presence of law enforcement, not only here but across the street with the city as well. And the fact is that generally speaking, that we are told that transit facilities like this want to have that kind of a presence. And
keeps it a little nicer and cleaner, and
well, it ensures that probably that things are peaceful and headed in the right direction the majority of the time. That people feel secure and safe when they're using the facility, and I think that's the same as any area of the Law and Justice Center that you might walk in and not know that there's a jail across the second floor of the vast majority of the Law and Justice Center as well.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I have one more if you'll indulge me. Yeah. So I'm assuming that this is going to be kind of a two-way around this L shape, this sideways L for bus access. Is that correct?
Yes, and I have learned the terminology sawtooth bus bays over the last several weeks. And as you can note, it's like a sawtooth almost. And my understanding is what this allows for dedicated locations for different bus routes. Mm-hmm. And it vastly improves this. This is a big thing from a transit standpoint. And Kyle, correct me if I say anything wrong here, but it provides the opportunity for individuals to know where they need to go each and every time they want to get on the bus, instead of having to wait and figure out, is this my bus down here? Now it's down here this time. Is it moving in line through? Each one of those sawtooths is dedicated, and we estimate that we can have 10 to 12 sawtooths, which allows for some expansion of the capacity without doubling up. Obviously, if you really got into a situation where transit began to boom, you'd be able to double up. But the goal here is for people to have a common reference as to where they go to get their bus.
Gotcha.
And so I go to the same place to get my green line bus, my red line bus, each and every time I want to get on the bus. And that's one of the goals of the sawtooth process. Also, from a safety standpoint, it improves safety dramatically because of the fact that there are good sight lines for the bus drivers leaving, pulling in, and there are not challenges relative to crossing that area as well. So we believe that it increases safety dramatically.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are past the 6:30 hour.
Yeah, my fault. Yeah, that's okay. But just to thank you very much, Bill. Just lest we though think that we might have an episode of Born Supremacy in Bloomington, remember these buses will take you to Eastland Mall, not Belgium or whatever, just FYI.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure. Of course.
I just want to make sure I understand. You're asking us, of course, to put our support behind this and not to seek a competing Tiger grant, right?
Well, that's up to you. We won't get into this.
I understand. But are there, if we, I think there's a lot to support here. Are there are there other obligations to the city in getting behind this?
Well,
are there financial obligations, et cetera?
We assume that that Connect Transit would operate their facility, their transfer facility, within the location. We would include this as our construction costs, the county's construction costs. It's going to be there either way for this facility, for this area of the facility. So, except for the addition of the sawtooth bus transfer kind of areas that are around in areas, the interior area is already included in our designs. It's already shelled space that we envision for future use. So it's not going to be a tremendous hindrance on our cost of moving forward with the project. And so we would use our project as the local match, basically. So this is part of the local match for the Tiger Grant would be basically, we're going to do our project and we're willing to collaborate with Connect Transit and their city and town partners to do that. So I don't foresee any specific city obligation to this. Obviously, you know, we are at the end of the day, someday from now, at the completion of the bonds for all this property, we end up being joint owners of the parking deck and those types of things. But I really don't see Connect's responsibility would be the transit area and operation of their facility.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. At this point, I guess I would say one of the costs to the city would be we're putting a jail and buses on Old Route 66, but that's neither here nor there. At this point, I wonder if we can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Schmidt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Hammond. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned, and we're going to begin like in 2 minutes for our township. So we have our township friends right here.